It's a story of three young women as they navigate the world, the traumas, the troubles, and seek solace and comfort in family. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my review of Mongrel by Hanako Footman. This is Footman's first novel, and it was longlisted for the Polari Prize's first book award this year in 2025. I will leave in the description down below, the show notes down below, a discussion of why I chose to read the books that were on that list, largely because of the controversy that happened surrounding that list. But I want to spend this time in this video talking about this book. So one of the things I've been doing when reviewing books, particularly books that I intend to review for the channel, in other words, make it a book review of some kind about, is that I've begun recording impressions just by taking notes on my phone. And I think have found these to be really valuable in kind of helping me organize my thoughts as I read through the book, as I get to the end of the book, and to kind of think about or have a record of what I thought while I was reading. So I'm just going to read the notes I have about Mongrel. They're not very long because I think the book's structure and its basic story become evident kind of early on, and then in a real way, because that story is one that's not, unfortunately, unfamiliar, it becomes easier to concentrate on the writing, the characters, the emotion, and what I think the author's trying to say. So here we go. These are my initial notes. Three young Japanese women, seemingly without mothers, who have to navigate the world in relationship and whose lives intertwine. We know in advance, broadly, what is going to happen to these girls as they encounter men and occasionally women, and none of it is good. This isn't because the author does anything wrong in terms of, making her plot too basic, but because the book is lacking in some way, but because we know the world we live in is lacking in what it requires of young women and the way it allows young girls and women to be treated. That, I think, is really at the heart of this book. So the book involves three young women, Maiko, Yushi, and the name I always forget, Haruka. Those three young women, two of whom spend one of whom grows up in a London suburb, one of whom lives in Japan and then moves to London, and one who grows up and lives in Japan her whole life, at least up to the point of the book. And each one of those three women experiences something experiences some trauma based on their relationships with men, sometimes based on the relationship with women, sometimes based on the relationship with family, that, as I said, are all too familiar. But the way in which they find their way through those things, the way in which they cope, the tragedy that's kind of at the heart or the center of the story of these three young women and that connects them, is, I think, unique and really powerfully told here in the book. One of the young women is a talented violinist who gets a chance to go and study violin in London, where she becomes involved in a relationship with her teacher. One of the young women grows up in a London suburb where she is the victim of racist things. She falls in love with her best friend, and she and her best friend have this kind of on-again, off-again, loving physical relationship, which appears to be, really deeply felt by both people, but maybe by one more than the other. And the third young woman grows up in Japan, where increasing knowledge of kind of family problems and family tragedy leads her to leave her home on a farm in rural Japan and move to Tokyo, where she becomes involved in sex work. And like I said, all three of these women have traumas, have events in their lives, which essentially kind of shape who they are becoming or who they are. And it would, on the surface, that's a really sad story, but I think in the end, it ends up being kind of a triumphant story about how at least two of these young women find peace with what's happened in their past, with their family, etc. I thought the writing was occasionally incredibly good. It's not that the writing is ever bad. I think sometimes it feels like the author might be straining a little bit too much for a description, but that's not true the majority of the time. The majority of the time, the writing is more along these lines. And so I just thought I'd read two passages for you. This is the first one. Everything seemed to drag during those winters. The soul was not fit to endure such sparseness. All living things were consumed by the ceaseless drift of white. It would encase the land in an absence of color, the same absence that fell on a mother's love until it was impossible to find lost to the winds and gray skies. Each day passed much the same as the last. From November to early March, life was a repetition of short days and shivering nights that kept the people of Tokamachi tangled up in shoulder knots. I just think that's really good. That's a really good description. I think even the way, the kind of almost monotonous rhythm of those first few sentences kind of emphasizes the monotony of the life being described in the winter in this kind of small Japanese community. And then there is a passage much later on in the book. The surrounding night is a cloudless pitch flung with stars. It is the kind of sky that is found at the edges of the world, away from the cities, natural and unimaginable in their glory. They count shooting stars as the wood smoke fills the air, and Mae cannot believe that a sky like this has been missing from her life until now. I just think there are a lot of beautiful passages in the book which make it a really kind of wondrous read. Another thing about the book I'll just mention really quickly is the description of food. I'm not somebody who's eaten a whole lot of Japanese food. You may not know this, but living in Texas and growing up where I did, I didn't have exposure to a lot of food from a lot of different places. But the food here, descriptions here are remarkable. Whether the food is disgusting or gross, or whether the food is amazing, whether it's prepackaged food from a convenience store, certain kinds of candy, certain things to drink or eat, or homemade food made in this Japanese farm home. It's all really brilliantly rendered, I think, and oftentimes, one of those things which made me quite hungry. My only real complaint about the book is that the print is entirely too small. So I'm going to hold this up and see if it works, so you can see how small the print is. Okay, so I'm old, and that print is really small. This required me to take my glasses off and hold the book incredibly close to my face to be able to read. I understand why Footnote, which is the imprint publisher of this book, might have decided to make the print so small. Maybe they want you to focus in on how small it is and how everyday it is, but maybe it's because they wanted to get a book on as few pages as possible. Either way, that did make it difficult to read. That's not the author's fault at all. That is a publishing issue. I think this is a really good book. If you're interested, if it sounds interesting, whether on a cultural level or a plot level or a character level or a writing level, I hope you will give it a shot and think about reading it. If you've read this or have any thoughts about what I said about this book or what I say about the Polari Prize down in the show notes down below, please leave me a comment. As always, thank you for watching.